The silence of deep space was not empty, it was heavy. It pressed against the thick metal walls of Outpost 42, a constant reminder that the structure was merely a tiny bubble of air in a vast, black ocean. Commander Mark sat in the central command chair, spinning a pen between his fingers. The chair was old, the leather worn smooth by years of use. He rubbed his eyes, trying to wipe away the tiredness that seemed to be a permanent part of him now. Outpost 42 was not a place for glory. It was a punishment post, located on the very edge of the star charts that humans dared to map. To the galactic south was the territory of the Human Federation, and to the north lay the Krellorian Empire. The Krellorians were a powerful race, masters of thousands of star systems. They viewed humans as primitive, referring to them as dust dwellers or livestock. Because of this view, the Krellorians allowed humans to live, provided they stayed in their poor, resource-poor sector of space. Mark looked around the room. His crew was small, but they were the best he had ever worked with. Sitting at the communications desk was Sarah. She was young, with bright eyes that hadn't yet lost their spark, despite being stuck on the edge of nowhere. She wore large headphones and stared at a screen that flickered with static. Her fingers danced over the keyboard, adjusting frequencies, listening for a voice that wasn't just background radiation. In the corner, cleaning a heavy pulse rifle, was James. He was a big man, quiet and strong. He acted as the security for the station, though they rarely had any trouble. Out here, the only thing they usually fought was boredom. Finally, there was Emily. She was not a soldier. She was a scientist and a medic, currently bent over a table covered in data pads and plant samples. She was fascinated by the edge of space because strange things sometimes washed up here, things no one else had seen before. "Status report," Mark said, his voice cutting through the low hum of the station's air filters. Sarah looked up. "Nothing significant, Commander. Just the usual background noise from the nebula. The long-range scanners are clear." "Good," Mark said. "Keep watching. The Empire has been moving more ships through the nearby trade lanes. I don't want them to mistake us for a target practice drone." James snorted. "They wouldn't waste the ammo on us. They barely know we exist." "Let's keep it that way," Mark replied. Suddenly, the quiet atmosphere changed. A red light began to flash on Sarah's console. A soft, rhythmic beeping sound filled the room, replacing the hum. Sarah frowned, tapping at her screen. "Commander," she said, her voice tight. "I am reading a gravitational spike. It is massive." Mark sat up straighter. "Location?" "It is coming from the dark zone," Sarah said. The dark zone was a myth to most people, a section of space that even the Krellorians avoided. It was an area of dense gravity wells and shifting magnetic fields where ships simply disappeared. No one went there. "Are you sure?" Mark asked, walking over to her station. "Could it be a sensor glitch?" "No," Emily chimed in from her desk, looking at her own monitor. "I am seeing it too. The readings are weird. It's not a ship entering hyperspace. It's like something is pushing the space apart. A tear." Mark looked at the data on Sarah's screen. The numbers were climbing fast. The energy signature was unlike anything he had seen in the Federation's database. It felt ancient and wrong. "Is it moving toward us?" Mark asked. "It is not moving yet," Sarah said. "But the energy is building. It's like a storm gathering." Mark felt a cold chill run down his spine. Instinct told him that this was trouble. He wasn't a scientist, but he was a soldier, and he knew when to be afraid. "Sarah, prepare a warning broadcast," Mark ordered. "Put it on all channels. Use the standard first contact package." "Who are we warning?" James asked, standing up and leaning against the wall. "There's nobody out there." "We are warning everyone," Mark said firmly. "Whatever that is, it is big enough to be detected by the Empire. I want it on record that we tried to stop them." Sarah nodded and began to type. A few seconds later, the message was ready. Mark gave the signal, and she hit send. A radio pulse shot out from the small outpost, racing across the void at the speed of light. "Warning to all vessels in the sector. This is Outpost 42. We have detected a high-level gravitational anomaly. This sector is dangerous. Do not approach. Repeat, do not approach. Maintain a safe distance." They waited. The message echoed into the darkness. For a long time, there was no reply. The red light on the console continued to pulse, but the anomaly in the dark zone remained silent. "Do you think anyone heard it?" Emily asked. "The Empire patrols this sector occasionally," Mark said. "If they are listening, they heard us. But will they listen? That is the question." 15 minutes later, the question was answered. The proximity alarm screamed. It was a loud, harsh sound that made everyone jump. Sarah's hands flew across her keyboard. "Contact!" she shouted. "Hyperspace entry. Right on top of us." Mark gripped the arms of his chair. "Visuals. Put it on the main screen." The large screen at the front of the room flickered to life. A swirling vortex of blue light opened in the distance, and from it emerged a ship. It was huge, far larger than the tiny Outpost 42. It was a Krillorian dreadnought, a spearhead of silver metal, glowing with blue engine light. It was a weapon of war, designed to destroy entire fleets. "It's the Empire," James said, lowering his rifle slightly. "We are dead." "They aren't firing yet," Mark observed. "Comms channel open," Sarah said. "They are hailing us. Audio only." Mark took a deep breath and touched his earpiece. "This is Commander Mark of the Human Federation. You are entering a restricted hazard zone. You must turn back immediately." The voice that replied was cold, arrogant, and translated through the computer instantly. It sounded like it was speaking through a tube of metal. "Silence, livestock," the voice said. "Your primitive sensors are malfunctioning. We are tracking an anomaly that belongs to the Empire. Move aside or be crushed." The sheer disrespect in the voice made James angry. He stepped forward to the console. Did he just call us livestock? Mark held up a hand to silence him. "Krillorian vessel, I am telling you this for your own safety. The gravity readings are unstable. If you get too close, your ship could be torn apart. Turn back." The Krillorian commander laughed. It was a dry, scratching sound. "We are the Empire. We do not take advice from dirt farmers. We are here to claim the power source that is hiding in this anomaly. You are nothing more than a speck of dust on our windscreen." "Commander," Emily said, her voice shaking. "The anomaly, it's reacting to their engines. The energy is spiking even higher." Mark tried again. "Admiral, listen to me. You do not know what you are waking up. It is not a power source. It is dangerous." "Enough," the Krillorian commander snapped. "Your chatter is interfering with our scans. Be grateful that I do not waste a torpedo on your pathetic little station. Stay where you are, and watch how the Empire conquers the unknown." The connection cut abruptly. "Commander!" Sarah yelled. "They are locking weapons. Not at us, they are aiming at the anomaly." On the screen, the silver hull of the dreadnought glowed. Massive banks of weapon ports slid open, revealing the blue glow of charging lasers. They were not just scanning, they were preparing to fire directly into the center of the gravitational disturbance. "They are going to shoot it," James said, disbelief in his voice. "They are shooting a black hole. They think they can break it open," Emily whispered. "They think there is technology inside." Mark stood up, his fists clenched. He knew they couldn't stop the Krillorians. Outpost 42 had no weapons that could scratch the paint on that ship. "Hold on to something," Mark shouted to his crew. "If they destabilize that gravity well, the shock wave is going to hit us hard." The dreadnought fired. A beam of pure blue energy lanced out from the ship, cutting through the dark space. It struck the center of the swirling anomaly. For a split second, nothing happened. The beam just disappeared into the black. Then, the darkness screamed. The anomaly turned from a dark gray to a deep, blood red. The space around the dreadnought began to twist and warp. The stars behind it distorted into lines. "What is happening?" Sarah cried out, covering her ears as the station's sensors began to wail. "They cracked the shell," Mark said, watching the screen in horror. "And they let something out." From the center of the red vortex, shapes began to emerge. They were not ships made of metal like the Krillorians. They were organic, shifting forms of muscle and claw, made of shadow and glowing light. They were huge, dwarfing the massive dreadnought. The Krillorian voice came back over the comms, but the arrogance was gone. It was replaced by raw terror. "Target is firing back. Shields are failing. What is this? Help us! Help us!" Mark watched in silence as the impossible shapes descended upon the Empire's ship. The warning he had sent was ignored. Now, the price for that ignorance was about to be paid. The blue beam of the Krillorian weapon faded into the dark void, but the silence that followed was far worse than the noise of the explosion. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against the hull of Outpost 42. On the main screen, the massive hole in space, once a swirling mix of purple and black, had turned a deep, angry red. It looked like a wound in the skin of the universe, pulsing with a steady, rhythmic light. Commander Mark stood frozen in the center of the room. His eyes were fixed on the screen. Around him, the hum of the station's air filters seemed louder than usual, a desperate mechanical sound trying to fill the void of his fear. "The shot went in," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the alarms. "It went straight into the center." "Did we get a reading?" Mark asked, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. Emily was typing furiously at her station, her face pale under the glow of the monitors. "The energy signature has changed completely. It's not reacting like a natural phenomenon anymore. It's stabilizing. Whatever the Empire did, they stopped it from collapsing." Mark felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He walked closer to the screen, watching the red light pulse. It was hypnotic and terrifying. "They didn't stop it," Mark said quietly. "They woke it up." Suddenly, the communications console lit up again. It was an open channel from the Krillorian dreadnought. Usually, Krillorian channels were encrypted and secure, but this one was blasting audio across all frequencies. It was panic, raw, unfiltered panic. "This is Grand Admiral Vrock. Report. What is the status of the anomaly?" The voice was shaking, the translator struggling to keep up with the alien's speed. "Why are our sensors not detecting the core? We were supposed to find a power source." A secondary voice, sounding like a junior officer, broke in. "Admiral. We are detecting movement. Multiple contacts emerging from the event horizon. They are not on any known registry. Identification failed." Mark looked at James. "Sound the general quarters. I want everyone at a station, even the cooks." James didn't argue. He ran to the intercom and punched the button. "General quarters. All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill." His voice boomed through the metal corridors of the small station. On the screen, the red light of the anomaly grew brighter. Then, like something being born from a nightmare, the first creature emerged. It was not a ship. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. The thing was alive. It was a leviathan of flesh and dark metal, miles long. It looked like a squid mixed with a shark, but its skin was as hard as armor. Tentacles writhed behind it, dragging through the vacuum of space. Where a mouth should be, there was only a glowing sphere of blinding white energy. It didn't float, it swam through the stars with a terrifying grace. "What is that?" Emily asked, her eyes wide with scientific horror and curiosity. "It's biological, but it's radiating energy signatures that rival a star." "It's a death sentence," James said, checking the charge on his rifle. "Look at the size of it. That thing could swallow the dreadnought whole." Behind the first creature, another one appeared. Then another. A swarm of smaller, fighter-sized shapes shot out from the red vortex like angry bees. The space around the Krillorian ship was suddenly teeming with life. Grand Admiral Vrock's voice screamed over the comms again. "Fire! Fire everything! Do not let them get close! Destroy the monsters!" The Krillorian dreadnought, a marvel of Imperial engineering, rotated its massive bulk. Its gun turrets glowed, and a barrage of missiles and lasers streaked toward the swarm. It was a display of power that usually destroyed entire planets. The sky lit up with explosions. But when the smoke cleared, the creatures were still there. The missiles hit the lead Leviathan, but they didn't explode. They simply sank into its fleshy armor, absorbed like rain into a sponge. The lasers washed over its skin like water off a duck's back. There were no sparks, no debris. The ship didn't even slow down. "Their weapons aren't working," Mark said, the realization hitting him like a punch to the chest. "The Empire's weapons are useless. Admiral, the contacts are accelerating." The Krillorian officer shouted over the open channel. "Impact in 10 seconds. Shields are up." "It's too late," Mark whispered. The swarm descended. They did not fire lasers. They did not launch torpedoes. They simply crashed into the Krillorian ship. The smaller fighter creatures acted like kamikaze drones, slamming into the silver hull, cracking the reinforced plating with sheer weight and speed. Then, the lead Leviathan reached the dreadnought. It opened a mouth that was larger than a city block. Rows of spinning, jagged teeth chewed into the engineering section of the dreadnought. Sparks flew, real sparks this time, alongside ruptured fuel and oxygen. The silence was broken by the tortured groan of dying metal. Even through the vacuum of space, the vibrations carried through the gravity sensors, shaking the floor of Outpost 42. "They're eating them," James said, his voice hollow. "They are literally eating the ship." On the screen, the mighty dreadnought, the pride of the Krillorian fleet, was tilting. Its engines were flickering. The smooth silver hull was now torn and jagged. Debris floated away, chunks of metal, escape pods, and atmosphere freezing into ice crystals. "Commander," Sarah said, her voice trembling. I am picking up a transmission. It's not Krillorian. It's coming from the creatures. Put it on the speaker, Mark ordered. A sound filled the room. It was not words. It was a screeching, high-pitched noise that made everyone cover their ears. It sounded like metal grinding against bone, mixed with a chorus of screaming children. It was a chaotic, violent noise. Turn it off. Mark yelled. Sarah cut the feed. The silence returned, but the heavy breathing of the crew could be heard. They aren't communicating, Emily said, looking at her data pad. That sound, it's a sonic weapon. They are using sound to disrupt the Krillorian's shield harmonics. That's why the shields failed. The Krillorian comms channel was still open, filled with screams and orders that made no sense. Sector 4 is breached. They are inside the hull. We cannot shoot them without hitting our own systems. Retreat. All units, retreat. Grand Admiral Vrock's voice came through, no longer arrogant, but desperate. This is impossible. We are the Empire. We are the supreme power. How can animals defeat us? They ignored the warning, Mark said, watching the destruction with cold eyes. They thought they were the kings of the universe. They forgot that nature always has a bigger predator. Suddenly, a massive explosion tore through the center of the dreadnought. The ship broke in half. The two sections drifted apart, spinning into the darkness, fires burning inside the broken hull. The creatures swarmed the wreckage, feasting on the metal and the energy. Commander, Sarah shouted. I have a new contact. Another ship just dropped out of hyperspace. Mark looked at the tactical map. Another Empire ship. No, Sarah said, zooming in the screen. It's one of their troop transports. It must have been following the dreadnought. The transport ship was much smaller than the battleship. It tried to turn around, running its engines at full power to escape the massacre. But the swarm noticed. 3 of the smaller creatures detached from the feast and chased after the transport. They moved faster than anything Mark had ever seen. They caught up to the transport in seconds. They're going to die, James said. The creatures didn't ram the transport. Instead, they fired beams of energy from their bodies, green, sickly lightning that arced across space. The transport's shields flared and died instantly. The lightning hit the engines, and the transport dead stopped. It was drifting now, helpless. Commander, Emily said. I think the creatures are hurting them. What? Mark asked. Look, she pointed. The swarm isn't destroying the transport. They are pushing it. They are driving it this way. Mark looked at the trajectory. The transport, disabled and drifting, was on a collision course with the asteroid field where Outpost 42 was located. They are running the fight toward us, Mark realized. The Krillorians are fleeing, and the monsters are chasing them right to our doorstep. Grand Admiral Vrock's voice crackled over the radio one last time. It was weak, filled with pain. Human outpost, this is. Admiral Vrock. We are, crippled. You must, assist us. You must fire, on these, beasts. Mark walked over to the communications console. He looked down at the button. He could reply. He could tell them no. He could laugh at them. He pressed the button. This is Commander Mark. You are bringing a hostile force into my territory. Turn your ship away. Do not come any closer to the station. We cannot, Vrock gasped. Engines, dead. Life support, failing. They are boarding us. Help us. We're wrong. Please, help us. The transmission turned to static. Mark looked at his crew. Sarah was crying softly. James looked ready to fight, even though he knew it was useless. Emily was just staring at the screen, her mind trying to process the biological impossibility of what they were seeing. The wreck of the dreadnought burned in the distance, a funeral pyre for the Empire's arrogance. But the danger wasn't over. The drifting transport ship was getting closer, and the glowing eyes of the space creatures were turning toward the small, metal box that was Outpost 42. Battle stations, Mark said again, his voice steady. They ignored the border warning. Now, we have to survive the consequences. The bridge of Outpost 42 was silent, but it was the tense kind of silence that comes right before a disaster. The red emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows across the metal walls. On the main screen, the burning wreckage of the Krillorian dreadnought was drifting away like a funeral pyre in the dark. It was a terrifying sight. The most powerful ship in the sector had been destroyed in minutes. But the danger was not over. The drifting Krillorian transport ship, heavily damaged and helpless, was sliding silently through the void. It was moving directly toward the small asteroid field where the human outpost was hidden. Following close behind it were 3 of the organic space creatures. They moved like sharks, their long tentacles trailing behind them, their eyes glowing with a hungry yellow light. Commander Mark stood in front of the screen, his hands clenched behind his back. He watched the tactical map. The red dots of the creatures were getting closer to the blue dot of the transport. They are hurting them, Mark said quietly. They aren't just killing the transport. They are pushing it toward us. Why? James asked, his heavy rifle gripped tightly in his hands. Why don't they just eat it like they did the big ship? Maybe they want fresh meat, James said darkly. Or maybe they are scanning for more threats, Emily added, looking at her data screen. The transport's engines are dead, but its distress beacon is screaming at full power. It is like a dinner bell. And we are right next to it. Suddenly, the communications console lit up. It was a direct hail from the drifting transport. Mark hesitated for a second, then touched the accept button. The voice that filled the room was panicked and full of pain. It was not Grand Admiral Vrock this time, but a lower-ranking officer. Human outpost. This is Krillorian Transport 7. We are dead in the water. Our engines are offline. Life support is failing. The creatures, they are toying with us. You must help us. Mark looked at Sarah, then at James. He took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. This is Commander Mark. I warned you. I told you not to approach the anomaly. You fired the shot that woke them up. We know. We know. The Krillorian officer screamed. Please, we are abandoning ship. We are launching escape pods. Do not fire on us. Grant us sanctuary. Mark closed his eyes for a moment. If he refused, the Krillorians would die. But if he let them in, the creatures would follow them right to the outpost. You are bringing the predators to our door, Mark said coldly. If you come here, you lead them to us. They are already following us. The officer cried. We have no choice. If you do not let us land, we will crash into your station. Mark looked at the tactical plot again. The Krillorian was right. The transport's momentum was carrying it straight into the asteroid belt. If it hit the station, the impact would destroy them all. Sarah, Mark said, his voice hard. Open the docking bays. But tell them if they deviate from the path, I will blow them out of the sky myself. Commander Sarah asked, surprised. Do it, Mark ordered. He turned to James. Get down to the docking bay. Armed guards only. I want those Krillorians contained. Do not let them wander the station. And James. Yes, sir. Don't let your guard down. These are still the Empire. James nodded, grabbed his gear, and ran out of the room. On the screen, the small escape pods began to eject from the transport. There were dozens of them, shooting out like sparks from a fire. The creatures ignored the pods. Instead, they turned their attention to the transport itself. One of the large creatures opened its mouth and bit down on the transport's hull. The metal crunched like a piece of candy. A few minutes later, the sound of airlocks hissing echoed through the station. The Krillorians had arrived. Commander Mark walked down to the docking bay to meet them. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and fear. When the inner door opened, a group of Krillorian soldiers stumbled in. They were tall, with gray skin and pointed ears, usually looking proud and tall. But now, they looked like frightened children. Their armor was scorched, and their weapons were empty. Leading them was a captain. He had a cut on his forehead, green blood dripping down his face. He looked at Mark, who was standing with Emily and a few armed guards. You. The captain spat, trying to sound angry but failing. You are the commander of this dust pile. I am, Mark said. And you are trespassing. We had no choice. The captain shouted. You saw what they did to the dreadnought. Monsters. Demons from the dark. They tore through Vrock's ship like paper. We warned you, Emily spoke up, her voice calm. We told you the anomaly was dangerous. You called us primitive. The captain lowered his head, his arrogance finally broken. We were arrogant. We thought we were the masters of this galaxy. We were wrong. He looked up at Mark, his eyes pleading. They are still out there. They are feeding on the transport. But soon, they will look for more food. This station, it is made of metal. They eat metal. We know, Mark said. We have a plan. But first, you and your men stay in the cargo hold. You do not touch our computers. You do not touch our weapons. You sit there and stay quiet. The captain nodded slowly. We accept your terms. Just, protect us. Mark turned to Emily. Let's get back to the bridge. We need to figure out how to kill those things before they finish their appetizers. When they returned to the command center, the mood was even darker. The transport ship outside had been completely destroyed. It was now just a cloud of debris. The three creatures were floating in the middle of the debris field. They were not moving. They were just waiting. Commander, Sarah said, her voice shaking. I think they are looking at us. Can they see us? Mark asked. I don't know, Emily said, studying the readings. But the transport is gone. The distress signal has stopped. And now, they are turning toward our asteroid. Suddenly, the station shook. A loud boom rattled the walls, sending tools crashing to the floor. What was that? Mark yelled, grabbing the console to steady himself. They just fired on us. Sarah shouted. A sonic beam. It didn't hit the station directly, it hit the asteroid next to us. The view screen shifted. The giant space rock floating a few hundred yards from the outpost had cracked down the middle. The creature had fired a warning shot. They know we are here, Mark said grimly. And they are coming. Just then, a message came in from the Krillorian captain in the cargo hold. Commander! You must help us. Our sensors picked up a transmission from the lead creature. It is a signal. What kind of signal? Mark asked over the intercom. It is a homing beacon. They are calling for more. Mark looked at the anomaly in the distance. The red vortex was still pulsing. Suddenly, small shapes began to pour out of it again. Not just 3 or 4, but hundreds. A swarm was coming. Sarah, Mark said, his voice deadly serious. Is the station's defensive grid online? Yes, but Commander, our pop guns won't scratch their armor. We saw that on the dreadnought. We don't need to scratch their armor, Mark said. He looked at Emily. You said earlier that the creatures use sound to disrupt shields, right? Yes, Emily nodded. Their sonic screams vibrate at a frequency that shatters solid matter. Mark looked at the old, rusty mining equipment stored in the station's logs. The outpost was built for asteroid mining, not war. But miners used seismic charges to break rocks. Sarah, Mark said, a plan forming in his mind. Reroute power from the life support to the external speakers. I want to blast them with something they won't like. Music? Sarah asked, confused. No, Mark said. Feedback. We are going to turn the station into one giant tuning fork. If they use sound, we can use it too. The swarm of creatures was getting closer. The yellow glow from their eyes illuminated the bridge. It looked like the stars were going out, replaced by hungry monsters. The Krillorian captain's voice came over the comms again, filled with despair. We are doomed. The Empire cannot save us. The humans cannot save us. We are going to die here in the dark. Mark looked at his terrified crew. They were not soldiers. They were miners and explorers. But they were humans. And humans did not go quietly into the dark. Stations everyone, Mark said, his voice strong and clear. These things ignored the border warning. They think we are just ants to be crushed. Today, we are going to show them that even an ant can bite. The first creature screamed a high-pitched sound that rattled their teeth. The station began to vibrate. Lock onto that frequency, Mark commanded. And reverse it? Emily's fingers flew across the keyboard. I have it. Ready to transmit on your command. Fire, Mark said. The station's external arrays, usually used for deep space communication, roared to life. But instead of a message, they sent out a wall of sound. It was a low, throbbing bass note, amplified 1,000 times. It wasn't a weapon of war, but a tool of industry, turned into a weapon of survival. The sound wave hit the lead creature. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the creature's skin began to ripple. It let out a confused cry. The sonic feedback was interfering with its own navigation and attack systems. It spun wildly in the air, crashing into its own wingman. It worked. James yelled over the comms from the docking bay. You confused them. We only bought ourselves a minute, Mark warned. They will adapt. We need a way to kill them, not just stun them. He looked at the tactical map. The swarm was regrouping. There were too many of them. The station could not hold out forever. They needed help. But there was no one else. Only the Krillorians. Mark made a hard choice. He opened a channel to the Krillorian captain. Captain, Mark said. Your ship is dead. But your fighters, did any of them launch? No, the captain said. We were disabled before launch. Then your escape pods, Mark said. Do they have maneuvering thrusters? Yes, small ones. Why? Because we are going to turn them into bombs, Mark said. And you are going to fly them. Silence on the line. Then, the Krillorian captain spoke, his voice shaking but determined. We will fly. We are ready to die for the Empire. No, Mark said. You will fly to save yourselves. Now listen to me carefully. The sound of the station's defense cannon still rang in everyone's ears. The high-pitched sonic blast had shattered the first wave of attackers, but Commander Mark knew it was only a temporary solution. On the main screen, the swarm of bioships was regrouping. They moved like a school of fish, turning and twisting in perfect synchronization. They were learning. The feedback frequency is changing, Sarah said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. They are adjusting their own resonance to block out our sound wave. In less than 2 minutes, our sonic cannon will be useless. Mark stared at the screen. The creatures were cautious now, but they were still hungry. They were spreading out, surrounding the asteroid field, cutting off any path of escape. The outpost was trapped in a cage of living nightmares. Commander, James's voice crackled over the intercom from the docking bay. The Krillorian captain is ready. His men are loading into the escape pods as we speak. But Mark, these things are escape pods. They don't have guns. They are just tin cans with thrusters. They don't need guns, James, Mark said grimly. They just need to be fast. Are the mining charges loaded? Yes, James replied. We strapped a seismic charge to the hull of every pod. But once they arm it, there is no turning back. The timer is short. They will have to fly straight into the teeth of those monsters. Connect me to the captain, Mark said. A moment later, the voice of the Krillorian captain came over the bridge speakers. He sounded scared, but there was a steel in his voice that hadn't been there before. We are prepared, human commander. My pilots are ready. We will crash these pods into the enemy. It is an honor to die fighting rather than be eaten in the dark. You aren't going there to die, Captain, Mark corrected him. You are going there to open a door. Listen closely. The swarm has a center. Look at your tactical display. See that large one, the one with the glowing red eyes? We see it, the captain said. It looks like the leader. That's the control node, Mark explained. My science officer, Emily, believes that creature is directing the swarm. If it falls, the others might get confused. They rely on a hive mind. Break the mind, and you break the swarm. Understood, the captain said. We will target the leader. No, Mark said sharply. You can't reach it yet. The smaller ones will swat you down before you get close. I need you to create a distraction. I need you to hit the left flank of the swarm. Hit them hard with the seismic charges. Blow a hole in their formation. And then what? Then, Mark said, looking at the readout of his own station's power levels. We will show them what human mining technology can really do. Emily looked up from her station, a sudden realization dawning on her face. Commander, are you thinking about the asteroid drill? I am, Mark said. The drill is meant to pierce planetary crusts. It has a diamond tip that vibrates at ultrasonic speeds. If we can boost the power output, we can turn the whole station into a spear. But the drill only points down, into the asteroid we are anchored to, Sarah pointed out. Not for long, Mark said. James, Tell the engineers to cut the stabilizer moorings. We are going to detach the outpost from the rock. Commander, if we detach, the station will drift, James warned. We won't have any gravity stabilization. We'll have thrusters, Mark countered. And we'll have momentum. We are going to use the asteroid as a shield, pivot the station, and fire the drill straight into that leader. It was a crazy plan. It was a suicide plan. But looking at the screen, seeing the hundreds of glowing eyes approaching, they were out of options. Execute, Mark ordered. In the docking bay, 10 Krillorian escape pods launched. They shot out from the underbelly of the station, small engines flaring. They didn't fly away from the swarm, they flew directly at it. On the bridge, the crew held their breath. The swarm reacted instantly. Dozens of the bioships turned toward the incoming pods, their mouths opening to fire the green lightning that had destroyed the transport. Now! Mark shouted. Inside the pods, the Krillorian pilots activated the seismic charges. The 10 small pods turned into 10 miniature suns. The explosion was blinding, even on the screen. The shock wave tore through the space between the station and the swarm. The bioships caught in the blast were ripped apart, their organic hulls shattering like glass. The left flank of the swarm was in chaos. Smoke and debris filled the void, blocking their view of the outpost. They did it, Sarah whispered. The path is clear. Engines full reverse. Mark yelled. Detach moorings. Pivot the station. The outpost 42 groaned. A deep, rumbling sound vibrated through the floor as the massive metal clamps holding the station to the asteroid released. The station drifted backward, slowly at first, then faster as the thrusters fired. The massive drill, usually pointing down at the rock, was now exposed to space. It was a huge, spinning cone of titanium and diamond. Power to the drill! Emily shouted. Divert all energy from life support. We have one shot. The air in the bridge grew warm as the station's power was redirected. The massive drill began to spin. It spun faster and faster until it was just a blur. It hummed with a terrifying energy, the same sonic frequency that had confused the creatures earlier, but 1,000 times more powerful. Target the leader. Mark ordered. The swarm realized what was happening. The leader creature, the massive leviathan in the center, turned its glowing red eyes toward the drifting station. It let out a scream, a psychic shock wave that made Sarah cry out in pain. It's locking on. James yelled. It's going to fire. Hold steady. Mark gripped the console. Ramming speed. The station shot forward, riding the momentum of the drift. The distance closed rapidly. The creature opened its mouth, green energy gathering in its throat. Fire! The station didn't fire a laser. It fired itself. The tip of the spinning drill slammed into the creature's chest just as it released its lightning. The lightning washed harmlessly over the spinning drill, scattered by the sonic field. But the drill did not stop. It bit deep into the creature's flesh. There was no metal armor to stop it this time. The drill tore through muscle and bone, grinding them into dust. The creature shrieked, a sound that shook the station's hull, throwing sparks from the ceiling consoles. Keep pushing. Mark screamed. Don't let up. The station shuddered violently as it plowed deeper into the monster. Green blood sprayed across the viewports, blinding the sensors. The smell of burning ozone filled the bridge. The creature thrashed, its tentacles beating against the station, denting the walls. But the drill had reached the core. With a final, Sickening crunch, the drill pierced the creature's heart. The creature went limp. Its glowing eyes flickered and went dark. Around the station, the effect was instantaneous. The remaining bioships stopped. They hovered in the void, unmoving. Without the leader's control, the hive mind was broken. They began to drift aimlessly, bumping into each other like lost children. "We killed it," Emily breathed. "We actually killed it?" "Status report," Mark said, slumping back into his chair. He was covered in sweat, his hands shaking slightly. "Hull breach on deck 4, James reported. Fire in the engine room. But we are still in one piece. The creature is dead." Mark looked at the screen. The battlefield was littered with debris. The Krillorian pods were gone, sacrificed for the victory. The swarm was retreating, disappearing back into the dark void from which they came. "Open a channel to the cargo hold," Mark said. The channel opened. "Commander," the Krillorian captain's voice came through. He was breathless. "We felt the impact. The tremors, did it work?" "It worked," Mark said. "The leader is dead. The swarm is retreating." Silence on the line. Then, cheering. The Krillorian soldiers in the cargo hold were cheering, a sound that Mark never thought he would hear. You did it," the captain said, his voice filled with awe. "You primitive humans. You destroyed what the Empire could not." "We didn't do it alone," Mark said. "Your pilots bought us the time we needed. They died with honor." "Yes," the captain said, his voice becoming somber. "They did." Mark cut the channel and looked at his crew. Sarah was wiping tears from her eyes. Emily was smiling, a look of pure relief on her face. Even James looked impressed. "What do we do now?" Commander Sarah asked. "The Empire is gone. We are just a little outpost again." Mark looked out the viewport at the stars. The Empire had ignored them. They had called them weak. They had called them primitive. But today, the humans had saved the day. The balance of power had changed, even if no one else knew it yet. "We fix the ship," Mark said. "We clean up the mess. And we wait." "Wait for what?" Emily asked. Mark smiled tiredly. "Wait for the Empire to come back. Because now, they know they owe us. And that is more dangerous than any monster in the dark." The red emergency light slowly faded back to white. The hum of the air filters returned, sounding less like a burden now and more like a song of survival. The battle was over. The warning had been given, and this time, it was heard. The silence that followed the battle was heavy and absolute. Outpost 42 drifted silently in the void, its hull scarred and scorched. The massive drill was still spinning slowly, coated in the green, glowing blood of the dead creature. The alarms had stopped, leaving only the quiet hum of the emergency generators. On the main screen, the swarm was gone. The strange organic ships had retreated back into the red vortex, and the vortex itself was slowly shrinking, disappearing like a fading bruise in the sky. The stars were bright again, cold and distant. Commander Mark sat in his chair, staring at the debris field that surrounded them. It was a graveyard of Krillorian ships and broken monster parts. His body ached, and his uniform was stained with grease and sweat. He felt tired, a deep exhaustion that went down to his bones. "Report," he said, his voice rough. Sarah looked at her monitors, her face pale. "Long-range scanners are clear, Commander. The anomaly is collapsing. The energy readings are dropping to normal levels. The red vortex is gone." The creatures, Mark asked. Retreated. They are heading back into deep space. They have no leader to guide them. And the Krillorians. 2 of their escort cruisers survived, James said, stepping onto the bridge. He looked like he had been through a war, with soot on his face and a bandage on his arm. They stayed back during the fight. They watched the whole thing from a safe distance. Now they are moving toward us. Mark let out a short, bitter laugh. Of course they are. They come to collect the scraps after we did the bleeding. Shall I raise the shields? Sarah asked. We don't have much power left. No, Mark said firmly. Open the docking bays again. Let them in. Commander, Emily said, looking up from her medical scanner. Are you sure? They might try to take over the station. They know we are weak. They know we are dangerous, Mark corrected her. And that is the only thing they respect. We don't have the energy to fight a war against the Empire right now. We have to talk. A few minutes later, the heavy doors of the conference room slid open. A Krillorian officer walked in. He wore a clean, white uniform, unlike the dirty, ragged soldiers they had rescued earlier. He was tall and held his head high, but his eyes were wary. He looked around the small, cramped room with a look of disgust, which he quickly tried to hide when he saw the human crew waiting for him. I am High Commander Thal, the Krillorian said stiffly. I represent the surviving fleet. Commander Mark, Mark said, not standing up. He gestured to a metal chair. Sit. Thal hesitated, then sat down. We have recovered our captain from the cargo hold. He has told us a remarkable story. He says you destroyed the hive leader with a mining tool. Works better than a laser sometimes, Mark said simply. The Empire acknowledges your assistance, Thal continued, choosing his words carefully. We lost a dreadnought and many brave pilots. Without your distraction, the swarm would have consumed us all. We lost good people too, Mark said. Don't forget that. Of course, Thal said quickly. However, this sector is now secure. The anomaly is closed. We will send a cleanup crew to salvage the wrecks. Mark leaned forward. The tension in the room spiked. You are not taking anything from this battlefield. That Krillorian captain and his pilots died to give us a chance. The wreckage stays here as a memorial. We will use what we need to fix our station. Thal narrowed his eyes. That is Imperial property. You cannot dictate terms to the Empire. I just saved your entire fleet, Mark said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. If we hadn't acted, you would be monster food right now. If you want to start a fight over space junk, go ahead. But remember, we have a drill that can punch through your ships, and we have nothing left to lose. Thal stared at Mark for a long time. The arrogance of the Empire was still there, but it was cracked. He was looking at a human who had done the impossible. He was afraid. Finally, Thal nodded slowly. Very well. The debris is yours. A gift from the Empire. It's not a gift if it's already ours, Mark said. Now, why are you really here? Thal took a deep breath. We need to report this to the Emperor. The swarm, it is an ancient threat. We thought we could control it. We were wrong. We need to update our star charts. We need to ensure no one else opens that door. And what about us? Emily asked. Are we still just livestock? Thal looked at her. For the first time, there was a hint of respect in his alien eyes. The Empire does not fight those who can protect themselves. Outpost 42, You are officially recognized as a sovereign guardian of the sector. Mark raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Yes, Thal said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small data chip. He placed it on the metal table. This contains the coordinates of a new trade route. One that bypasses the heavy imperial taxes. Consider it payment for your service. Mark looked at the chip. It was small, but it was worth more than the entire outpost. It was a way for the humans to actually trade and grow rich without the Empire crushing them. You're bribing us, Mark said. I am ensuring we remain friends, Thal corrected. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Commander Mark. The Empire needs strong allies on the borders. Not just slaves. Thal stood up. He straightened his uniform. My ships are leaving. We will not mention this defeat in our official reports. We will say it was a joint victory. It saves face for us, and it makes you heroes in the eyes of the Empire. That will keep you safe. Get out, Mark said, but there was no heat in his voice. Thal nodded and left the room. A few minutes later, the station vibrated slightly as the Krillorian cruisers jumped into hyperspace. They were gone. Mark picked up the data chip. He turned to his crew. Well, he said. I didn't see that coming. James grinned. We scared them, Commander. They actually listened to us. It wasn't just fear, Emily said softly. It was respect. They finally saw us as equals. We are not equals yet, Mark said, standing up and walking to the window. He looked out at the stars. But we took a step today. He looked at his tired, battered crew. Sarah was yawning, James was wiping grease off his hands, Emily was packing her medical kit. They were just a group of misfits on a rusty station in the middle of nowhere. But today, they had stood up to an empire and beaten a monster. What do we do now? Sarah asked. Do we go back to being ignored? Mark smiled, a real, genuine smile. No. Now, we use that trade route. We upgrade the station. We build better defenses. The Empire ignored the border warning once. We are going to make sure they never ignore us again. He held up the data chip. And tomorrow, we start the paperwork. We are going to officially request better supplies from Earth. And this time, when we say it's urgent, they might actually listen. James laughed. Paperwork. That sounds almost as scary as the monsters. Mark looked out the viewport one last time. The border was quiet. The darkness was empty. But he knew that things had changed. The galaxy was watching Outpost 42 now. They were no longer the weak little humans on the edge of space. They were the ones who had fought back. Get some rest, everyone, Mark ordered. We earned it. The crew slowly filed out of the bridge, leaving Mark alone. He sat back down in the command chair. The leather was still worn, but the station felt different. It felt stronger. He watched the stars, silent and bright, knowing that whatever came next, they would be ready for it. The Empire had ignored the warning. But they would never ignore the humans again. End.